Enjoy the lobster. Tell Rick to check his portfolio. And that's all I texted, 11 words. And yet, within 127 seconds, my phone lit up. Not with a sweet apology, not with some attempt at plausible denial. No, she called, breathless, voice cracking, pure panic wrapped in forced control. "What did you do?" she hissed without a greeting. In the background, I could hear Rick yelling, not just raising his voice, yelling. Full-blown tantrum mode, the kind of financial meltdown that only happens when a man realizes too late he's been playing a game with someone who's been reading the rule book upside down the entire time. I stirred the marinara sauce on my cold spaghetti with one hand, phone in the other, and said nothing for a moment. Just let her stew in that silence. Let her imagine the possibilities. Let her feel for once like maybe she didn't know everything. "I'm sorry, what's the emergency?" I said, calm as a corpse. "What does that text mean? Why would you say that to him? He's going ballistic." "Is he allergic to shellfish?" I asked, deadpan. "Or just market volatility?" That set her off. "Don't mess with me right now. I'm serious. He's losing it." "What the hell did you do?" A long time ago, I might have panicked at that tone, rushed to reassure her, maybe even blamed myself for the tension, tried to smooth it over with wine and meek apologies for imaginary sins. That version of me, quiet, accommodating, wallpaper of a man, died somewhere around the 10th time she told me not to wait up, that it was just a dinner, that I should trust her. But trust has a shelf life. And mine expired the day I found a single receipt tucked into the lining of her coat. A coat I bought her for our anniversary, ironically. Not a receipt from a hotel, no, something better. A handwritten bill from Lancaster, the most pretentious seafood place in the city, for private room, premium wine pairing. 2 entrees, lobster, and a bottle of Petrus 96, total 381074. Tip 22% on Rick's Amex, and in the corner, scribbled in her familiar handwriting. Laughed until I cried, RM. She left it in her coat, like I was too dumb to check for dry cleaning slips. That was 8 months ago. So yeah, I knew exactly who tonight's client dinner was with. I just finally decided to RSVP. By the way, if you've been hooked this far, do me one favor. More than 97% of readers don't follow or subscribe, and yet that one click helps this team keep doing what we do best, digging deeper, darker, and colder. So go ahead, subscribe. You'll thank yourself later. Back to her voice on the line, sharp and crumbling. "He says someone dumped a ton of capital right before close. A mystery firm. He's trying to trace it. Do you know anything about that?" "Maybe he should diversify," I said. "Too many eggs in one lobster trap." "You're not funny," she snapped. I let that sit. A lot of people confuse silence with compliance. But silence? Silence is where revenge sharpens its blade. The irony is, she always thought I didn't understand money. She thought Rick was this Wall Street wizard, and I was some half-retired engineer who got lucky with a severance package and spent his days watching history documentaries. She'd roll her eyes when I brought up capital gains or derivatives, say things like, "You're cute when you try to understand finance." Rick must have thought the same. The few times we met, he spoke to me like a high school teacher talking to the janitor about investment strategies. Slow, patronizing, all ego. That made it easier. Because while Rick was busy inflating his fund's value with high-risk bets and showing her graphs over oysters, I was matching every major move with mirrored counterpositions, quietly, surgically, and from the outside. Through a holding company I formed 5 years ago during a sabbatical. That's what she called it anyway. Thought I was having a midlife crisis. I was, but not the kind she expected. Mine involved spreadsheets, not sports cars. "Tell Rick to check his exposure on Ocelia Energy," I said, just before hanging up. "Might be some surprises in the morning." She started to speak again, but I ended the call, not because I was angry, because there was laundry in the dryer, and I like folding clothes while they're still warm. Let her sit with that. Let Rick scream. Let them call every fund partner they can find, chase ghosts through shell cores, and pray for a market correction. Because this wasn't about stocks. It was about erosion, quiet, invisible erosion, like trust, like love, like a husband who used to wait up just in case she came home early. I stopped doing that 3 months ago. Now I wait for something else. And tonight it just rang my phone. There's a special kind of power in being ignored. Most men hate it, fight it, scream into the void for validation like it's a birthright, not me. I learned early being underestimated is currency, and I've been investing that currency for years, quietly, efficiently, patiently. It started during what she called my early retirement, a nice way of saying she was tired of introducing me at parties as someone with a job that didn't require a custom suit. "You've earned a break," she said. "Focus on yourself for once." What she meant was, don't interfere. Let her become someone else, someone sleeker, someone who deserved to be admired without the weight of my presence at her side. At first, I let her believe it was my idea. Early mornings, long walks, a few hours fiddling with old books in the garage. On the outside, a man trying to find purpose. On the inside, I was already building. Rick entered our lives through a mutual acquaintance at some vineyard charity thing. You know the type. Buttoned shirt, unbuttoned one too many, hair slicked back like it's still 1987, and a handshake that made up for its softness with eye contact rehearsed in a mirror. I knew who he was before we were introduced. These guys always have a fund. It's always boutique, always agile, always filled with accredited investors only. Red flag translation, over-leveraged, ego-fed, one market shock away from collapse. Still, I shook his hand. Let him size me up. He thought I was her burden. She called me her sweet anchor once when introducing me to him. You know, stable, reliable, but unmoving. He smiled politely. They exchanged glances. I remember that glance. That was when I decided to buy into his fund. Not directly, of course. Rick's compliance filter would have caught my name. But the beauty of Delaware is that no one asked too many questions. I registered under an LLC name boring enough to be invisible. Nothing with alpha or capital or investments in the title. Just initials. Through a broker friend who owed me a favor and knew how to keep his mouth shut, I slowly bought in. Monthly, then quarterly, a little more each time, always keeping below the reporting thresholds that might have raised his eyebrows. By the end of the second year, I was the second largest limited partner in the fund he ran so confidently. She didn't know. Of course she didn't. She thought I was building birdhouses in the garage. In truth, I was studying every quarterly report Rick sent his LPs, every slide deck, every fund memo full of buzzwords like sector rotation and emerging volatility windows. Rick loved jargon, but I spoke fluent risk. He didn't know that. I began mirroring the trades, not through him, outside. Watching his fund go long on mid-cap tech, I'd quietly short it. Not always, not obviously, just enough to balance exposure. I hedged every move he made like I was building a shadow portfolio in real time. Every time he had a win, I already knew about it. Every time he took a loss, I was insulated. And sometimes, when I felt particularly amused, I'd make the exact same move 5 minutes before he did, through another firm, another shell. He must have thought he had competitors with identical strategies. He'd probably call it market pressure. Funny. I kept spreadsheets, logs, printouts, just in case. At night, I'd sit beside her on the couch. She'd scroll Instagram, showing me how amazing Rick's girlfriend looked in Mykonos. "So chic, right?" she'd ask. "His clients love him, I mean, obviously." I'd nod. "Obvious," I'd repeat. And then I'd go back to my tablet, pretending to read the news while quietly noting that Rick's fund had increased exposure to Argentine agri-futures. A risky play, especially considering who now controlled 32% of the opposite contract side through a tiny trading desk in Zurich. Mine. There's no better camo than mediocrity. And I wore it like a suit. The best part? Rick bragged about me once. To her. Said his fund was bringing in serious players lately. Guys with deep pockets, Odie said. We're becoming a magnet for big money. She told me that over breakfast one morning, laughing. You should think about investing, she said between bites of avocado toast. Even you might get in now. Even me. I smiled and poured her more coffee. I was already in, and I'd already started planting the fault lines. I stood in the doorway with a steaming cup of chamomile when she came in, 2:47 a.m., hair tousled, heels in hand, cheeks flushed in that very specific way that had nothing to do with wine and everything to do with ego. Someone's still up, she said, blinking at the light. Her smile was the kind women give when they think they're smarter than you. When they're sure the game is over and they've already won. I handed her the tea like I always did. Calm, silent, predictable. She liked predictable. Predictable meant safe. It meant I wasn't a threat to her new version of life. How was it? I asked softly, just enough warmth to make her feel unthreatened. She sipped. Long. Rick's got a new group of investors. Real serious ones. They were celebrating the fund's Q3 performance. Blah blah numbers, blah blah leverage. She waved a hand and leaned against the kitchen counter, pretending to yawn. That was a tell. She never yawned when talking about money. She yawned when she was lying. Her phone buzzed. She didn't check it. Rick probably making sure she got home. Or maybe not. Maybe he didn't care. That was the thing about men like Rick. They're charming right up until the risk outweighs the reward. Then they vanish. I moved to the dining table, picked up my iPad, and tapped it once. A small ding echoed through the room, a subtle, cheerful chime. Her eyes flicked toward it, just once. Then back to her tea. "What's that?" she asked. "Just a price alert," I said. "Markets are still awake in Asia." She didn't ask which markets. She never did. She had this belief, no, the certainty that I didn't really understand the world she lived in, that I was a relic from a slower, simpler time. Her harmless little husband, who used to manage teams and budgets and now spent too much time rearranging bookshelves and organizing garage tools. She told her friend that, by the way. I heard her. She was tipsy and loud at the bar downtown, the one she thinks I don't know she goes to. I was 2 tables behind, trying the duck confit. A man can dine out alone, you know, especially when he has a reservation under someone else's name. "He's harmless," she said, sipping something pink and expensive. "I could be gone all night and he wouldn't even ask." Her friend laughed. "You've got him house-trained." Then Rick chimed in. "Just make sure he never gets curious. Old guys get weird when they feel left out." I think it was meant as a joke. But Rick isn't funny. He's a forecast wrapped in a Rolex. When she said goodnight to them later that night and got in the Uber, yes, the one I paid for via a shared card she forgot I still had access to, I was already home. Lights dimmed, dishes done, trading terminals open. That chime she heard? It wasn't random. It was a kill switch test. One of the dummy trades I had riding the same risk exposure as Rick's leveraged biotech play. Just a whisper of movement on the charts, but loud enough if you knew what to listen for. She finished her tea in 2 gulps, kissed me on the cheek with routine obligation, and headed upstairs without another word. But something flickered there, right before she turned, just a small crease in her brow. Maybe it was the time. Maybe the tone in my voice. Maybe the fact that I hadn't asked about her dinner, or who was there, or why her perfume smelled different. That silence wasn't apathy. It was the absence of permission. She used to feel like she needed my approval. Then she just wanted my absence. Now she was beginning to sense something worse, my indifference. And that scared her more than anything, because love fading is tragic. But respect evaporating? That's fatal. Upstairs, she took a long time in the bathroom, longer than usual. I heard drawers open and close, a rustling of bags. Maybe she was checking for something. Maybe she thought she'd lost a receipt or left a trail. She had, but not the kind you can find in a purse. The next morning, she was oddly affectionate, made eggs, asked if I wanted to go to the lake that weekend. "I thought you had work," I said. She paused. "I can move things around." I nodded. "Sure, let's plan for it." She smiled. I didn't, because I knew exactly what was coming. And now she was starting to feel it too, just under the surface, like the distant hum of a machine warming up, something she couldn't name yet. But she would, soon. Rick's voice was already cracking when she picked up. He didn't waste time with pleasantries. "What does your husband know?" She blinked, still half asleep. "What?" "The margin cascade, it started 10 minutes before close. Ocelia was the keystone position and someone dumped it, all of it, then shorted the rebound. That doesn't just happen. Who the hell is Monarch Umbrella Holdings?" She sat up slowly, trying to push the fog from her brain. "What are you talking about?" "Monarch Umbrella Holdings, LLC, Delaware. They dropped the entire tranche of our long position and used that liquidity to torque the spread. That's not retail. That's not coincidence. That's tactical." She rubbed her temple. "I don't know what that means." Rick inhaled sharply like he was trying not to scream. "It means someone just lit the fuse under the entire fund, and we're sitting on leveraged tinder. That firm's mailing address matches something your husband mentioned years ago when we were at your lake house. Don't you remember? She stood and started pacing the bedroom. Wait, what are you even saying? He doesn't trade, Rick. He microwaves frozen pizza. He thinks a short squeeze is laundry related. Rick didn't laugh. He didn't say anything for a few seconds. Just breathing. Labored. Then he just triggered a cascading sell-off across our beta-aligned positions. We lost 14% in 40 minutes. That's half a year's yield. Redemption requests are flooding in. I can't halt them. Compliance won't let me. You need to talk to him. Right now. She sat down slowly at the edge of the bed, like her legs suddenly lost structural integrity. There's no way. He doesn't even know how to access that kind of capital. He was an operations manager. He used to fix printers. Rick snapped, Jesus, Melissa, do you even know what he's done the last 3 years? Do you? She didn't answer. Rick hung up. She sat still, phone in her lap, silence ringing louder than the call. She didn't move, didn't blink, just stared into space like the wall might offer some explanation. Monarch Umbrella. That name, it stirred something faint in the back of her mind. Not a conversation, but a moment. A line he said offhandedly over breakfast during a vacation. They were drinking coffee on the porch in Tahoe, and she was scrolling emails. He was reading a book, something boring. She remembered because he said, did you know Delaware has more LLCs than people? And she had just nodded absently, replying to Rick. Then he added, thinking of registering one. Umbrella protection, you know. She said, do whatever you want, babe. That was it. That was the moment. He'd told her, not with deception, not in secret, but in plain sight, because he knew she wasn't listening. Not really. Downstairs, she heard the garage door open. He was already up, already moving. She walked down barefoot, cautiously, like she was approaching a stranger's house. He was in the kitchen, cracking eggs, humming something classical, calm, surgical. He turned as she walked in. You're up early, he said. Want breakfast? She stared at him. Her mouth opened, closed. Then she said it. What's Monarch Umbrella Holdings? He didn't answer immediately. Just flipped the eggs. Let them sizzle. The aroma of butter filled the air like nothing was wrong. Then, with his back to her, just a little side project. Rick called. I figured. He says you triggered a margin cascade. He plated the eggs. Perfect, unbroken yolks. Toast on the side, her favorite. He slid the plate across the counter to her like a peace offering from a man who'd already won the war. I told him to diversify, he said. No one listens anymore. She stared at the plate, at him, at the absurdity of it all. This man who she'd dismissed as harmless now being whispered about in panicked calls by the very people she'd spent years admiring, idolizing, clinging to. What did you do? She whispered. He finally looked her in the eyes. I pulled the thread, he said, the one holding all of Rick's clever little bets together, the same one you kept tugging over and over without realizing it was fraying. She shook her head. You're not... This isn't who you are. No, he said. This is who I became because of who you decided I wasn't. He turned back to his coffee. She didn't touch the eggs. Rick's fund was bleeding, and her understanding of the man she married was hemorrhaging right alongside it. The steakhouse reservation was for 7:45. Private booth, same place they'd gone last quarter when Rick announced his record returns and toasted to smart risks and smarter company. She'd picked the dress out the night before, deep burgundy, low back, subtle slit, not flashy, just expensive looking enough to remind everyone she was Rick's favorite, but she never made it to the valet. Instead, she was doing 75 down the Pacific Coast Highway, gripping the steering wheel like it owed her answers. Her phone kept lighting up with texts from Rick. Where are you? This is serious, Mel. Everything's unraveling. What did you tell him? She didn't answer. She just drove. Windows down, hair whipping, teeth clenched so tight her jaw ached. She didn't even notice the sunset. Didn't care. Her hands trembled at every red light, her foot jamming the gas the second green blinked on. She pulled into the driveway like a storm system, yanked the gear into park, and bolted inside. He was in the living room, folding laundry, perfectly calm. A stack of t-shirts on the armrest, another pile of socks in progress. The TV was on, low volume, some documentary about deep-sea organisms. She slammed the door behind her. What did you do to Rick? He didn't flinch, didn't even look up right away. finished matching 2 socks, laid them gently on the pile then. Rick should have read the fine print. Her hands were balled into fists. What the hell does that mean? Or the filings, he added, then finally looked at her, those eyes, so still, so maddeningly neutral. No gloating, no panic, just awareness. You don't file anything, she snapped, voice cracking. You don't even open the mail. You throw tax docs in the junk drawer. Your drawer, he corrected. Mine's upstairs. Her breath hitched. You what? I do file, he said, rising slowly. Just not where you look. Then he walked past her like she wasn't even a threat, like she was a guest in a house she didn't pay for. She followed him, fast, up the stairs, into the home office she'd long since stopped paying attention to. A narrow room with muted gray walls, a standing desk, and a single drawer cabinet. He opened it with a key she hadn't noticed hanging on a chain around his neck, and he pulled out a folder, bound, labeled, heavy, set it down on the desk with a soft thud. She stared at it like it might explode. He didn't open it, didn't need to. Index of asset positions, he said, capital gains tracking, regulatory notices, custodian correspondence, annual compliance reviews, all under Monarch umbrella, of course, and some side exposure under First Perimeter Partners. That one's newer. You're making this up, am I? She reached for the folder with a shaking hand, flipped it open, and stopped. First page, an internal memo from a fund services firm dated over 3 years ago. Her name in the CC field, a note in the margin, in her husband's handwriting. She never asked. I didn't know, she said quietly. No, he agreed. You didn't want to. She sank into the chair beside the desk. Rick said someone was trying to destroy him. He nodded. I believe that's how he's choosing to interpret accountability. This can't be real. It's real enough for the SEC to start poking around tomorrow. Her head whipped up. You're reporting him? I'm not reporting anything, he said, just untangling my positions, and incidentally flagging compliance discrepancies where my name happens to appear. Can't be too careful. You're going to ruin him. No, he is ruining him. I'm just no longer holding the weight of his bad bets. The silence that followed was oppressive, not cold, not violent, just inarguable. She'd come here ready to shout, to accuse, to claw at the curtain she thought he was hiding behind. But there was no curtain, just a man standing in plain sight, who'd been warning her, softly for years, through subtle cues and polite gestures, through silent coffees and uneventful birthdays. And she'd ignored every one. She stood, desperate now. Why? Why would you go this far? He didn't answer right away, just looked at her with something that wasn't quite anger, not pity either, just calculation, like he was still deciding how much more she deserved to know. Finally, you used my silence as a reason to stop listening. I used it to start watching. Then he turned, walked out, and left her alone with the evidence. And the eggshell realization that maybe he hadn't been folding laundry. He'd been folding her exit, one crease at a time. At 8:06 a.m., Rick's assistant, an over-polished guy named Tyler who once called me Melissa's husband, with a tone like he was referencing a broken office chair, burst into Rick's office with a printed email already creased from trembling hands. Sir, you need to see this. Rick, who hadn't slept, looked up from the triple espresso he hadn't touched. His suit was wrinkled, tie loosened, the top button of his shirt unfastened like it was choking the last ounce of control out of him. The email was from a regulatory advisory group, language clinical, legal, surgical. Effective immediately, all support from Monarch Umbrella Holdings had been withdrawn. Simultaneously, a tip had been forwarded to a financial oversight agency pointing to a potential pattern of misrepresented asset classes, failure to disclose affiliated entities, and suspect NAV reporting for the past 2 fiscal years. That last part hit him hardest. He had used internal leverage without sufficient counterparty disclosure, which was fine until someone holding those positions pulled support with just the right timing and just the right whisper in just the right regulatory ear. He fumbled for his phone. Another notification pinged before he could dial. Subject: inquiry, fund stability and silent partner exit. Comment from a blog he used to laugh about. Rumor-mongering amateurs, he'd said once over drinks. Clickbait nobodies. Now it wasn't funny. Now the clickbait was eating the structure from the inside out. He called her again, third time that morning. She didn't answer at first, but when she finally did, he didn't even greet her. No sarcasm, no charm, just the voice of a man watching a bridge collapse while still standing on it. He knows, Rick said, hoarse. He's unraveling everything. I don't even know where to plug the holes anymore. She swallowed. What do you want me to do? Talk to him. Make him stop. Tell him we'll make it right. We'll fix it. This isn't just hurting me. It's hurting you, too. She hesitated, because deep down, she wasn't sure that was true anymore. When she hung up with Rick, she didn't think. She called my number, straight to voicemail. Then again, and again. Fourth time, I picked up. No greeting, no warmth, just, he's falling apart. Do you get that? He's losing everything. I took a breath. What a careless thing to build on borrowed trust. You're destroying him, she said, her voice cracking. No, I said evenly. He built it wrong. I just leaned on it. There was a silence. A long one. I could hear her breathing, ragged, shallow. I didn't know, she said. I believed her. That was the problem. You don't need to destroy him just to punish me, she added, voice trembling now. I'm not punishing you, I said. I'm just done protecting you. She tried again. You don't have to do this. You made your point. I haven't even opened the second folder, I said. This was just exposure control. Jesus, she whispered. Then I heard it, the slow breakdown in her breath. Not a sob, not yet, but the inhale before it, that fragile intake that says the mask is slipping, the armor's cracking, and reality is starting to bleed in through the seams. I didn't wait for her to speak again. I hung up because she still didn't understand. This wasn't rage. This wasn't revenge. This was physics. You stack weight too high on rotten beams. Eventually, something snaps. I didn't swing the axe. I just stepped back and let the ceiling fall. Meanwhile, Rick was frantically texting investors, spinning stories, blaming market conditions, asking compliance to hold off on the language until he could clarify the ownership shifts. But it was too late. Redemption requests were flooding in like floodwater through cracked drywall. The leak wasn't plugging. It was multiplying. By 10:42 a.m., his team reported a 31% drop in AUM. By 11:15, the custodian froze wire transfers pending an audit review. She spent that morning pacing the kitchen barefoot, still in last night's clothes, replaying every moment she'd dismissed me, every time I said something and she smiled with condescension, every boring little sentence she tuned out. She had never thought to ask what I did with my time. Now, she was afraid to know. Because whatever Rick had been, mentor, lover, fantasy, it no longer mattered. He was falling. And the man folding her towels at 2 a.m. was the one who had greased the slide. 3:11 p.m. That's when her phone began vibrating nonstop, like it had slipped into a seizure. At first, it was just the usual. Work email, promotional spam, something about a wine tasting. But then came the messages with no subject lines. The cryptic ones. From her old college friend. Have you seen this? From a woman she hadn't spoken to in 4 years. You're trending. From her sister. Is this about Rick? Please tell me it's not. She opened the last one, thumb trembling. Attached was a screenshot from an investment blog, not even a major one, just one of those second-tier insider scoop sites with a black and white masthead and ads for watches nobody really buys. Headline, Silent Whale Spooks Boutique Fund. Is this the end of Lancaster Holdings? Subheading, a mysterious investor has withdrawn support from Lancaster Holdings, triggering a liquidation spiral and SEC scrutiny. Sources suggest the entity was closer to the fund than previously known. She read it once, then again. The comments were worse. Wait, isn't this the same Rick from Monarch Ridge? Isn't he dating that woman? Melissa something? Someone posted a photo of her in Tahoe with him last spring. Her name, her actual legal Googleable name, in black text, on a public forum, tied to a spiraling hedge fund collapse. Her face flushed so fast it gave her vertigo. She staggered backward and gripped the edge of the kitchen counter, suddenly ice cold. She scrolled further. Someone had posted a group shot from a benefit gala in Napa, Rick's arm loosely around her waist, the way a man does when he's gotten comfortable claiming what isn't technically his. Drawn a red circle around their heads, tagged her personal Instagram handle. Then came the theories. Of course they did. That's how the internet works. Was she the plant? Girlfriend helps insider sabotage fund after affair goes sour. No way the husband didn't know. This is revenge action, but make it financial. She felt nauseous. She didn't even hear him come in. I was already at the table plating dinner, grilled halibut, steamed rice, sautéed spinach, simple, clean, exact, like always. She sat down across from me slowly, hands shaking as she picked up her fork, trying to will the world back to normal. I didn't say anything at first, just poured her a glass of wine. Let her settle. Let the silence stretch long enough to fray nerves, but not long enough to give her a grip. Then, mid-bite, I set down my fork. Might be a good time to distance yourself, I said. Publicly. Her eyes darted to mine like she'd been slapped. What? The name, I continued. It's out there now. And the photos. Can't undo that, but you can minimize proximity. You think I'm going to release a statement? She spat. I think you'll do what you always do, I said evenly. Protect what's left of the image. She stood up, knocking her chair back. This isn't some branding issue. People are dragging me into something I had nothing to do with. I didn't flinch. You're in the photos, at the dinners, the retreats, the yacht, the Christmas party. You didn't exactly hide it. She was seething now. None of this would be happening if you hadn't... Hadn't what? I asked calmly. Noticed? She froze, not because she had a comeback, because I was right. She sank back into her chair, as if gravity had suddenly doubled. Her phone lit up again. A message from someone on Rick's team. You should probably issue a denial, or a lawyered no comment. This isn't dying down. Another from her sister. Mom saw the article. She's freaking out. Another. I can't believe you'd ruin someone over a fling. She didn't reply to any of them, just stared at her plate like the food might offer redemption. I picked up my fork again. We can wait a few days, I said, not looking at her. Let the panic burn out, or you can get ahead of it. Depends what you want to protect more, Rick or whatever's left of your reputation. The way she looked at me then, like she was realizing for the first time that I'd never once raised my voice through any of this. Never yelled, never accused, just acted. The power of stillness was something she had never understood. Until now. Now she sat in it, stewed in it, swallowed it like poison, and the poison was working. By Thursday morning, Rick's office was triaging investor calls like a war hospital. Redemptions were flooding in faster than legal could stall them. Email subject lines read like obituaries, urgent NAV clarification, pending withdrawal request, concern regarding risk exposure, and the one Rick dreaded most, SEC inquiry, need statement. His head trader quit at 9:47 a.m. Compliance left a voicemail at 10:03 recommending he step back temporarily until clarity is achieved. Rick threw his phone across the office at 10:06. By 10:30, it was being whispered on Bloomberg terminal chats. Lancaster's dead in the water. The words illiquidity event started popping up on Twitter threads. Every hedge fund gossip account, half reliable, fully viral, was running theories. It was financial sepsis, the kind no PR tourniquet could contain. Melissa had spent the morning pretending she wasn't watching it unfold. She made coffee, did her makeup, sat in front of her laptop, and stared at a blank Word doc for 2 hours, trying to pretend she could just write it all away, explain herself, distance herself, spin it. But the screen stayed blank, and the words never came. At 1:12 p.m., a courier dropped off a thick envelope. She signed without reading the return address. Inside was a single-page legal notice. Notice of asset transfer, 72% equity stake in Lakeview property, effective immediately. It took her 2 reads to understand. The Tahoe home, Rick's pride and joy, their escape, the one he always joked would be the first place he'd go if the market ever turned, was no longer his. It had been held under a real estate holding company, one that just transferred controlling interest. To Monarch Umbrella, she didn't even drop the letter. She just sat down on the cold tile of the kitchen floor, like someone unplugged her spine. She called Rick. He answered on the first ring. He didn't say hello. It's gone, he whispered. She didn't ask what. She already knew. Why was it tied to margin? She asked anyway, needing him to say it. I used it as collateral, he said. His voice was wreckage, dry, thin, scorched. It was clean equity, good for leverage. I thought I could handle it, just short term, to balance the pharma swing. You said it was untouchable. It was, he said, and then, barely audible, until he touched it. He started crying then, not the kind of crying that makes you feel pity, the kind that makes you feel distance. The weeping of a man who knows the damage is no longer reversible and that the destruction was, in fact, personalized. She hung up before he could beg. She didn't have the energy to pretend she wasn't furious or frightened or sick with the shame of recognizing this wasn't a spontaneous collapse. It was execution, planned, precise, measured, and she hadn't just let it happen. She'd paved the runway for it. She walked upstairs, phone clutched tight, and found me in the study, flipping through an old economics hardcover, the one she used to say was too dense to be useful. I didn't look up, just said, "It's done then?" She sat across from me. "Why now?" she asked. It came out brittle, like the question had taken effort to shape. I turned the page, slowly, like I hadn't been waiting for her to ask. Then I looked at her, really looked at her, and said, "Because I wanted you to see it fall, piece by piece, like trust does." She flinched, visibly, like the words were knives. She opened her mouth, but nothing came out. Not defense, not denial, not even an apology. Because how do you apologize for erosion? It doesn't happen all at once. It's not the affair, not just the lies. It's the 100 little dismissals, the rolled eyes, the patronizing smirks, the nights you came home with perfume on your coat and assumed I'd be too tired or too dumb to notice. You gave Rick the illusion of control and gave me the illusion of irrelevance. He built the fund. You built the story. I just watched. And now you both get to live in the wreckage. She showed up at the lawyer's office looking like someone on the edge of dehydration, pressed blazer, sunglasses indoors, hands that wouldn't stop fidgeting with the clasp on her purse. She was used to walking into rooms like that and being the most composed person there. Not that day. The attorney, high-end, surgically polite, and already very aware of the Lancaster situation, sat her down with a legal pad and a tight smile. "I need to know what he has access to," she said, before the door even closed. "Our accounts, our house, the trust, anything he could be using." The attorney listened, nodded, asked for documentation. Then came the quiet unraveling. First, the Tahoe property, legally transferred, documents signed and dated a year prior, notarized, witnessed, irrefutable. Then the investment positions, not in her name, not tied to any joint holdings. A separate legal entity formed before the marriage ever reached its first rough patch. On paper, she didn't exist. Bank accounts? Clean. No unauthorized withdrawals, no red flags. Everything he used, he either owned, created, or had legal access to without needing her name or permission. "You understand," the attorney said slowly, delicately. "He hasn't touched anything that belongs jointly to the two of you. Everything he's done has been external." She blinked. "So if this goes to court, there's no misappropriation," the lawyer said gently. "There's no paper trail to dispute, just consequences." She didn't cry, she didn't shout, she just stared. Even when she called Rick later that day, some desperate last-ditch Hail Mary to see if he could corroborate her version, maybe give her something she could use, he didn't even try to sugarcoat it. "I looked through everything," he admitted. "The man didn't touch our personal stuff. Not once." She sat on the edge of her bed, fingers tangled in her hair. "Then how the hell did he bring you down?" Rick's voice was hollow. "He beat me at my own game." That night, she came home, late, quiet. No heels, no lipstick, no perfume. Just her and the heavy silence she'd tried to ignore for months. I was in the living room, legs crossed, reading a book. An old hardcover with frayed corners and yellowing pages. The kind I like to collect, the kind she used to mock for being dusty and irrelevant. She didn't say anything at first, just stood there in the doorway, unsure whether to speak or turn around and pretend she'd forgotten something in the car. Then she walked in, sat across from me, waited. I didn't look up, just turned a page. Finally, her voice, small like she was afraid it would echo in the emptiness of what we used to be. "I never meant to hurt you." I finished the sentence I was reading, paused, then, "But you did." That was it. No speech, no lecture, no gloating, because there was nothing left to say, no more lines to draw, no more illusions to sell. She opened her mouth like she wanted to say something else, then closed it again. And that was when she realized the worst part. Not that I had outplayed her, not that Rick's empire was ashes and the world had finally seen behind their curtain. No, the worst part was this. It was already over, and I was already past her. The envelope arrived on a Thursday. No return address, just her name, cleanly typed. A government standard beige, the kind that signals something official or irreversible. She opened it slowly, carefully, like she already knew it wasn't going to hold anything she wanted. Inside, a formal notice of divorce proceedings. Already filed, already processed, her name spelled correctly, every detail in place. The paperwork had been sitting in wait, it seemed, just waiting for the right moment to slide into her life like a blade. And attached to the front page with a bright yellow sticky note in his familiar handwriting, "Tell Rick I recommend he liquidate fast." That was all. No rage, no accusations, no emotional autopsy. Just strategy. As always. That evening, the news broke. Quietly at first, like a candle snuffing out mid-dinner, Lancaster Holdings to close operations following investor exodus. They didn't even mention Rick by name in the title. Just a quote buried halfway down. "We regret the impact recent shifts have had on our limited partners. Market confidence is fragile, and despite our best efforts, recovery was not sustainable." Fragile. That word again. She sat at her kitchen table, staring at the same counter where she used to pour 2 glasses of wine, assuming he'd always be there to join her. The silence was louder now. No updates from Rick, no texts from friends, no calls from the brunch set. She had become radioactive, financially and socially, guilt by association. When she logged into her shared calendar out of habit, all the events were gone, even the Tahoe weekends, even the anniversary reminders she used to ignore. It was all scrubbed. Later that night, she dug through an old drawer, something she hadn't touched in years, and found an old USB drive shaped like a hotel key, one of those promotional ones from a couple's retreat they went to early in the marriage, before the distance, before Rick, before everything got convenient. She plugged it in. It auto-played a video, the two of them sitting on a porch swing in Sedona, wind in their hair, laughing about something stupid. She was teasing him about how he didn't know how to fold a map. He was making some sarcastic joke in return. But what stood out was the look on his face. He was smiling, really smiling. That man didn't exist anymore. He didn't leave because of Rick. He left because she killed the version of him who still believed her. And by the time she noticed, all that remained was the cleanup. She watched the video twice. The third time she turned the screen off halfway through. Meanwhile, I was walking by the lake. Not far, not symbolic. Just quiet, no music, no monologue. The water was calm. The air cold enough to keep the crowds away. The kind of peace you can't buy with trust funds or hedge positions. My phone buzzed once. I didn't look, didn't answer, didn't need to. There are moments where power isn't about what you say. It's about what you withhold. And after years of watching, waiting, enduring, I'd given enough. Now I took what mattered most. Not revenge, not even justice, just distance, permanent, total, and silent.